What is going on, beautiful people? It is Matt Kelley. It is Matty Riser. It is the Wrestlemats. And Matty, it is time to play the game.
Time to play the game. Now. Triple H, the King of Kings, the cerebral assassin. Triple H.
Your headliner for the 2025 WWE Hall of Fame, Paul Levesque, Triple H, WWE's head of creative and all things good going on in WWE right now, quite frankly. I mean, he's had one hell of a career. We are going to go from beginning to end. But, Matty, before we jump into Triple H's Hall of Fame career, we got more WWE Hall of Fame news. Just this past week, you and I were talking, texting back and forth because the live reaction was really cool for this one. Michelle McCool was on Get Up along with the Undertaker. ESPN's Get Up. It's like their morning, sports talk show. And Triple H pops up on the screen, lets Michelle McCool know that she is also alongside him going into the WWE Hall of Fame. So really cool moment there for Michelle to be getting in that Divas era and then to be alongside the Undertaker, just kind of makes it that much more special.
Yeah, we had talked about just how cool of a moment this was and how it kind of gives you that gold jacket feel of the NFL
Yeah.
Hall of Fame. And I think it's perfect for what we get. We get this backstage look of WWE and the universe. And I think Triple H did it the right way on an ESPN live television show that everybody's watching. Props to Michelle McCool, though, because looking back at her, I didn't realize how highly decorated she was during this Divas era. First ever Divas champ, unified the Divas and the WWE Women's Championship. A lot to kind of unpack there, but man, props to Michelle McCool.
And I started, of course, once that happened, you start seeing more and more highlights of her career and things of that sort. And you realize it's like, oh, wait a minute. Michelle McCool had the goods, man. Like she was actually really, really athletic, especially when you consider the overall arc and athlete type that was going on in the Divas era. I think Michelle McCool was probably at the top of her game. And she's made mention of it before. Had they really let the Divas go in that era, the kind of matches that they probably could have had, I think, like, yes, she is a Hall of Fame talent. I'm not going to argue that whatsoever. I just think maybe we got a little bit robbed of what we could have seen from Michelle McCool.
Yeah, right place, wrong time. We saw,
Yeah,
like, I think
yeah,
I
yeah,
looked up one of her first matches was a bra and panties match, and you're just like, come on. Like,
yeah.
this is not what we needed. I mean, maybe we just didn't know better at the time, but where women's wrestling is now, golly, Michelle McCool, like I said, could have been one. She is one of the goats, but what could have been if she would have just 10 years later in her career.
Yeah, I know. My 15-year-old self obviously did not know better at the time, but alas, alas, here we are. So kudos to Michelle in all seriousness. And it's going to be awesome to see her there at the WWE Hall of Fame getting inducted. Who do you think, Matty, inducts her? I heard her say in an interview that she actually wanted to go in as Lay Cool, and that was kind of
Ooh,
before she knew that she was actually going in, but she was, hyping up Layla as well and kind of wanted to go in as in that partnership, that tag team, because it was such a huge part of her career. So do you think Layla gets the nod to induct her and then maybe gets her own induction at some point, or is Michelle gonna rely on Taker? I mean, who do you think it is?
I think she's gonna get to pick whoever she wants, and I think
Oh,
that's
for
gonna be the
sure,
cool,
for sure.
yeah, the cool aspect of it. We always piggyback to the Vince McMahon era to
Mhm.
now, and I think, yeah, I think Lay Cool would be a good kind of pay homage to that tag team and how entertaining it was as a heel tag team.
Yeah, yeah. I think if for whatever reason they're not going to go in specifically as Cool, it would be a cool moment to get Layla there back to induct her because it does seem like they're still good friends, and so that would be a cool little reunion we would get there to kick off things at the WWE Hall of Fame. But let's move on to our main event headliner. I told you about him. He is the current head of all things WWE. It is Paul Levesque, Triple H. But let's throw it all the way back, Matty, here to get started. And you see, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you see that picture there on the far right, the wavy blonde locks. Oh, buddy, the tan going on. I mean, just nothing says 90s quite like that picture of one Terra Riser at the time, as it's what Triple H started his career as.
Old school, old school. Yeah, the blonde locks coming out of Killer Kowalski's wrestling school. Does everybody? The one thing I'm pretty sure Killer Kowalski had the claw. Is that one of? Was that his
Yes.
main finisher?
Yeah, I
Yes,
believe so. Yeah, baby. Yep.
just a different, but yeah, coming out 92. Dude graduated high school in 87. Within 5 years, he's got his footprint in professional wrestling into WCW, one of our guilty pleasures of the 90s, Matt. And yeah, we see wrestling school. He's in there with Perry Saturn, and that's where he meets the infamous Joni Lauer, aka China, in pro
Yeah.
wrestling. But yeah, instant thoughts of 93 terrorizing in WCW.
Well, thankfully, somebody had the sense to say Terrorizer is an okay '90s name, but they at least had the foresight to say maybe it's not the best long term. So, I mean, look, between that, the physique, his work ethic, it got him on screen, so it got him into
Right.
the dance, if you will. But luckily, somebody had the foresight to say, "Hey, your last name is Levesque, right? And so maybe we should turn you into this French guy." So his his WCW stint did not end as Terrorizer. He comes back as Jean Paul Levesque, and he's got these long purple tights, the riding boots, the slick back ponytail. He's basically playing the French aristocrat. So I think that actually helped propel him, as ridiculous as it was, to really making the difference and standing out to not only make a bigger name in WCW, but then to eventually end up in the WWE.
When he built a character off that, the
Yeah.
aristocrat or the blue blood, what it transforms into, but the riding boots, the I'm better than you. That's
Hmm.
perfect heel tactics 101, especially in the 90s. I mean, dude, he had the look, but to be able to just mentally develop this character going from Terra Riser, which, believe it or not, my last name is Riser. I wish I
Yeah.
spelled it Ryzer, but but yeah, man, it's crazy to see like all these characters that were formed in WCW, Oz, Stunning Steve Austin,
Hmm.
the Paul Levizik or whatever, Terrorizer, all these characters that WCW just didn't know what to do with. And when you
Mm.
get to the big leagues, they get formed and then they get platformed and they go, jet set to the top. It's crazy.
And I was telling you just before we hopped on that I was kind of doing my homework a little bit over the week, knowing that we had this topic coming, and I went back and watched an old Triple H doc called "Thy Kingdom Come," and specifically about this part, it made me realize, it dawned on me, and how WCW had the power plant back at that time, which is where a lot of the wrestlers were training there in Atlanta, Georgia. And it made me think, how much of that influence with the power plant did he take when he kind of started building NXT and the concept of what NXT is now? It seemed like he applied maybe a lot of the things that he was able to take advantage of there and be able to get those reps in so that he would be TV ready and that sort of thing, and now applied it to NXT. And you see how this NXT talent is coming up, Matty. It's people are ready faster than ever now.
Dude, I never thought about that. That's an astute observation because WWE was training a ring in a warehouse with Dory Funk Jr.
Yeah, I
Like
think so. Yeah.
there wasn't anything to it. At least WCW had the power plant, which from what I understand was head and shoulders above what WWE had. It's just sad that WCW really wasn't able to make any homegrown talent from the power plant other than maybe Goldberg.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, obviously they had hits along the way, but yeah, just never really capitalized on kind of all the talent that was sitting right there underneath their nose, and that leads
Right.
to Triple H basically saying, he signed a 1 year deal there in WCW. Basically told the promoter there at the time, look, you're either going to know I am not worth this at all, or I'm going to be worth way, way more in a year's time. And it turns out he was right. He goes and has a conversation with Vince. Vince says, hey, come work for us. Hunter takes it, and he comes over to WWE as Hunter Hearst Helmsley. So it's a little bit more of a refined version of Jean Paul Levesque. And you see, he's got the elevated attire, but it's still very much, it's almost early day French MJF a little bit, right? Like the whole better than you thing, just the very heel, the very snobby, nothing's good enough. And this is where he really starts to make his mark in wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I always
Hmm.
remember that, and the pinky up, and just
Yep, yep.
these early stage heels. Everybody had a gimmick or a character in WWF at the time, and he was able to make this one work. And I really think it helped that he formed this on his own. He wasn't necessarily just given a gimmick; he made the gimmick. So
Had the
for yeah,
No, I was just gonna say he had the curtsy as well in the ring. I
yeah.
mean,
Oh
ev
man,
e everything about him, you're just like, "I just wanna punch this guy right now." So, I mean, he took it and he just ran with it, and, obviously, he goes from that into one of the most maybe the biggest faction ever in professional wrestling, Matty. I mean, DX, NWO, 1, 2, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it. But once Triple H gets there, forms Degeneration X with Shawn Michaels, it's Will's up. He is the guy there in WWE.
elevated by a mile. How do you go? You go from this like mid card guy that's kind of you're losing the Henry Godwin. You're having matches with Wildman Mark Marrow. You're kind of floundering in the mid card. And I don't know if this necessarily it was probably the biggest strap a rocket to you that you could have had when you have Shawn Michaels, one of the most arrogant heels of all time, but probably 97, 98, he was probably one of the best in the world by far, especially as a heel. And you get Triple H, he hooks himself with China, the bodyguard. I mean, look at just what China did for him. Who else had a bodyguard, a woman bodybuilder that's bigger than the guy? That's just,
And
I mean, I wouldn't fuck with China.
yeah, no, not at all. And to back up before I miss a whole thing, you talk about Hunter losing to talent that's just kind of not at the exact same level that he was at the
Right.
point in time that he's building towards DX. Big part of Triple H having to go from where he was to where he got to was the curtain call, which is now obviously infamous. The first time that guys really broke any sort of kayfabe out there in front of a live audience. So, talking about Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels, and Triple H there, all getting together in the ring in a cage match in Madison Square Garden, getting together, hugging it out because they know that their two buddies are there leaving for WCW. And Triple H talked about how, this really came back on him more than anybody else. And so that could have been career suicide right then and there.
Absolutely. You're breaking kayfabe. Good guys, bad guys, they used to not travel together. You would never see them in the same place. You would hide, whatnot. But you're literally breaking, as CM Punk would say, the fourth wall. You're doing
Mhm,
things that, especially in 96, were unheard of. And then to literally, like Vince said, you got to eat shit and like the taste.
mhm.
Whether it was Mark Marrow, whether it was Mankind, Goldust, he was constantly Henry Godwin, he was constantly losing, but that also gave us Austin 316. So we can't be too mad about it. King of the Ring 96 was Triple H's till that curtain call incident happened. Not only were
Wow,
we able to, yeah, we broke kayfabe, and
wow.
look, Stone Cold would have maybe never been Stone Cold if
Talk
it
about
wasn't for
altering history, man. Holy
huge.
shit. I for whatever reason that as we were prepping for this, that did not cross my mind that Austin 316 would have just possibly never ever happened. And it probably so who did he cut Austin 316? Was it Jake Roberts?
Jake Roberts. He came
Yeah.
back
Okay.
as
So Jake
basically
the
that
Snake.
Bible thumper good guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And
man,
yeah,
that's
what
that's
an
wild.
infamous night in wrestling. And that was still WWE was behind the curve of
Mhm.
WCW. WCW was real life. It was everything. We were still dealing with Duke the Dumpster Drosky, Mantar, all these terrible gimmicks.
Yeah.
And then you have Austin 316, and that's to me the birth of the Attitude Era. Another step, but we said kayfabe, right?
Yeah.
That's we see it now. Kayfabe is probably the most interesting aspect of pro wrestling. And Triple H was one of the main, catalysts of that in the 90s.
So if we go back to that time and then we kick it back over to D-Generation X, which initially forms there, to your point with China being the heater there for Triple H, you got Rick Rude, and then you got Shawn Michaels in there as well. Matty, DX, NWO, basically going blow for blow right there in the Monday Night Wars. Were you a DX guy? Were you an NWO guy?
I think it's hard not to go DX. Just because as a kid, I think I was like what, fifth grade, the crotch
Hmm.
chop, the suck it, you know.
Oh, we all got in
I'm
trouble for that, man.
Oh man, that's nostalgia at its finest. Just what DX was for all of us wrestling fans now. What have we always came back to? WCW, they'd have something good and they'd flounder it. So you have the NWO. It's great at first, the Outsiders, Hollywood, and then it gets watered down. Pretty soon you've got Brutus, Barber Beefcake, Stevie Ray,
There was
all
like
these
20
guys.
guys, man. There was
Yeah,
like
come
20
on.
guys in NWO. Yeah. And I mean that is kind of one of the charms and one of the really good parts I think about DX is you only had X number of people, no pun intended, that really ever got into this group. And so, Sean leaves and Triple H has to figure out, well, what's he gonna do to kind of
Right.
keep DX going? Who's he going to surround himself in? He's at the point of building this faction at a time where Vince doesn't really want factions in the WWE. So he brings along X-Pac, he brings along the New Age Outlaws, and then you got China there, of course. And I mean, that fivesome, I mean, is just synonymous with everything that was rocketing WWE and really probably helped propel them and take them to the next level there in the Monday Night Wars.
Absolutely. And it made Triple H the leader. That infamous promo where he goes, Shawn Michaels, you dropped the ball. It was the
Yep.
night after WrestleMania, and that like clicked. It was like, okay, Triple H, he doesn't care if you're his best friend. You let him down. He's putting this on his back and he's getting us to the top. But yeah, who would have thought Road Dog or what was his name? Rockabilly and the Roadie? Who would have thought these guys,
Oh,
the New
back
Age
then.
Outlaws? Yeah, one,
Yeah,
two, three,
yeah,
kid. Like that's what
yeah,
we
yeah.
got. That's WWF in the 90s right there.
But also kudos to Triple H for seeing, kind of having that vision at the time.
Right.
And I think what speaks to really Triple H being at a different tier of stardom is that he takes those guys and he gives them the rocket ship. And then, I mean, at that point, the New Age Outlaws are definitely the most popular WWE tag team, without a question. X-Pac, I don't know if he was technically a cruiserweight or what he kind of went after as. I think he was like European champion at some point. Anyway, they all had gold. They all had highlights on the show. They were all featured every single week, and it was most certainly because of Triple H.
Absolutely. That is what got him to that upper echelon. You see the feuds with The Rock at SummerSlam, Nation of Domination, DX, must watch TV, and that kind of helped, I'd say, solidify himself as a leader, as a upper mid card talent.
And then to kind of break away from that, you hear him say he's got to make the decision when DX is at its height that he's going to go off and be a solo act. He's going to go off, do his own thing. The balls, Matty, the balls to walk away from DX. But it's very much like, I mean, it's for a lack of why can't I think of a better analogy right now than Beyonce leaving Destiny's Child? But that's
But
but that's what it is. She sets
you
off on
gotta,
her own, and she's a
yeah.
megastar. It's Justin Timberlake and NSYNC. He goes off, he's a megastar. Triple H goes off, he becomes a megastar. Matty.
And you got to know when to hold them and you got to know when to fold them. And Triple H did that, just that. He said, bye, bye, bye. So it was perfect timing all the way around. I was glad I got to get those in.
There you go.
I turned on Beyonce, her country song
Uh-huh.
today, just seeing what my wife would do. And she said, no. I was like,
Oh,
okay.
Matty by
This
proxy,
isn't
I have
cowboy
heard.
country.
Oh, Cowboy Carter is the album. By proxy, I have heard that album more than maybe any other human on earth. My wife loves that album, and when she works from home,
Okay.
I have heard it quite a bit, so I'm quite
Yeah.
familiar there. But let's talk a little bit more about Triple H on his solo run, Matty. I have a very, very vivid memory of after Triple H tore his quad and coming back to Madison Square Garden to make that entrance, and they tease this thing out the entire show, waiting for Triple H, waiting for. I mean, they drag this thing out, man. But the way that building reacted that night, Triple H coming out in what was a leather jacket but a jean vest,
Oh my God.
and I mean, he just looked like an absolute monster at the top of that stage, and that to me is an ovation and an eruption for somebody that is sorely missed and that people are looking forward to investing back in. That's not uh somebody that's been away for a couple of weeks and you kind of forgot. It's not the little pops you get at the Rumble. I mean, this was megastar pop.
I think that's the greatest return of all time.
It's up there. I
We
can't
knew
argue it.
we knew it was coming. This guy's been a heel his whole career. He comes back in the Garden, jacked to the gills. This guy tore his quad, literally stayed in Birmingham, Alabama to rehab the whole time. Didn't go home, stayed in a Embassy Suites hotel. That's how dedicated this guy was to his craft, to literally scratch and claw your way back to the top and then to get that pop as a face. And that's another step. This is wrestling fans showing you their appreciation. They know this
Right.
guy's a heel, but they still come out and go bonkers, as Pat Patterson would say, bananas for the game. Triple H. Yeah, 2002 Triple H. I think that was, I don't think you can name a better wrestler in 2002 at that moment than Triple H. He was hot.
And I mean, he just, man, it was just like everything he touched turned to gold at that point. And even years later, it was still turned to gold as he ends up starting one of another most memorable faction. I think you're lucky throughout your WWE career if you're in one faction that is transcendent of the sport. Triple H was in two because then he goes out and he forms Evolution with Ric Flair, Batista, and Randy Orton.
This might go down. I mean, it's underrated as a faction, but as far as making talent, what he was able to do for Batista and Randy Orton, I can't think of a better, more like awesome opportunity than Batista and Randy Orton had. Triple H, they've already always said he is the best mind in the business. It's proven. But to what would Batista be without Evolution, without Triple H? He wouldn't be a
I
movie star. He wouldn't have been. He
no,
would have been, maybe a mid card guy. He was
I think
before
it's
this.
I think it's
Well,
in
he
the
was
same territory to
yeah,
wonder if Austin 316 would have happened.
right.
It's in that same breath, right?
Yeah, you had what was it, Deacon Batista or what, or Deacon Dave?
Something like that. Yeah.
It was awful, and he just was raw. He didn't have but dude, and that's more props to Triple H. And not only that, you had Ric Flair didn't have his mind wasn't in it at that point.
No.
He was, and that was another thing. He just lost his son Reed. There was a lot going on in Ric Flair's motto just from being in WCW and the shit show that was. But for Triple H to take all these guys, surround himself, and kind of give them the rub when he didn't have to do that. And that's probably that time in 03, 04 is when Triple H was getting shit on the most for being married to Stephanie McMahon or being dating, whatnot. And to make Ric Flair gain his mojo, and you got Orton and Batista, come on.
What do you think Ric Flair and his final, well,
Jesus Christ.
technically not final match, but also final match, right?
Oh
But
my
you know what I'm
God.
talking about. The match with Shawn, the one that
Right.
everyone should consider Rick's last match. I don't think he gets there, man. If he doesn't end up in Evolution, I really don't.
No way. Yeah, like I said, Triple H, we're gonna say it a million times, but good God, like we just didn't know what we had at the time. But now when you look at this, Hall of Fame career retrospective, like we're just talking about it. You see check mark after check mark of all these moments, all these like just mannerisms and things he changed for a guy, or storytelling. That's why he's the boss.
What do you think your favorite version of Triple H is? Is it like the DX silly Triple H? Is it the cerebral assassin? Is it the kind of the corporate mind of him out there? Like, what's your favorite when you think Triple H? What do you think about?
I think of Triple H in that '03 Evolution with the kind of the long
Okay.
hair, wearing the suit, big gold belt,
Uh
and just
huh.
being the ultimate heel. And I think he was, as a wrestler, I think he was, putting over guys. I think he went on a streak where it was like WrestleMania. I might be wrong about this, but it was 20 through 22. He wrestles Shawn and Benoit. He wrestles Batista, and then he wrestles Cena at WrestleMania. And you have three main events where he puts over guys clean. But at the same time, he was probably the ultimate heel in the wrestling industry during those 3 years.
And I'm curious now that you say that because it's really close to when I went to WrestleMania 27. He lost clean to Taker. Not that Taker necessarily needed to be put over, but it's a massive rivalry when you got two alpha
Yeah.
athletes out there, and then he loses again at 28, right? Because it's Hell in the Cell the year after
Yep.
that. So I would be curious. Maybe I can look it up here in a minute, but I wonder if his WrestleMania record is kind of reflective towards like John. Like I don't think John Cena has a winning record at WrestleMania. I'm pretty sure of it. In fact, I wonder if Triple H is just kind of in the same vein, right? Like we think of him as one of the greatest of all time, but you go back and you look and you're like, oh man, he kind of really gave it up in the biggest moments.
Yeah. Add Daniel Bryan, add Ultimate Warrior. Like there's so many different Roman Reigns, right? So many different matches, I believe. Yeah. And I mean, nobody remembers those. I mean, you do when you think about it, but you think about the matches, just the Daniel Bryan moment with Triple H, the
Mm-hmm.
Batista moment where the student finally becomes better than the teacher. So many, or Chris Benoit wins his first title after 20 years of wrestling. So many iconic moments that Triple H was involved with. And for a guy we've all heard on the dirt sheets and the smart marks, pushed everybody down. Other than maybe beating Booker T at WrestleMania, what was that, like WrestleMania 19? I
That
think,
sounds right.
yeah, I mean, come on. And look what Booker T turned into, King Booker, all these things. So it's just crazy to look at a retrospective of a guy who was one of the goats of all time to be able to put over talent. And, he did it the right way because you see so many guys who care so much about winning and losing. For him to do what he's did is unbelievable.
So here you go, Matty. He has 24 matches at WrestleMania all time, 10 wins,
Wow.
14 losses. Uh,
Okay.
his first WrestleMania 12. That seems almost wrong. That's forever ago. WrestleMania 35 against Batista. He did win his last WrestleMania match. I guess at that time, I have to imagine he probably did not think that was going to be his last WrestleMania match, but it turns out to be. And I mean, yeah, man. To your point, outside of maybe Booker T or whatever, I what else do you have to say?
10 and 14. That's enough right there. Like, you're not even 500% at WrestleMania.
No, no. So one of the goats. Yeah, not even a winning record at the showcase of the Immortals. Let's jump into a little bit more here before we get out of the way, Maddie. Best feuds, best moments. I think we both knocked out a best moment for each of us there with the Garden return. Who are some of your favorite feuds though with Triple H?
I think I always go back to that, Cactus Jack, Mick Foley of 99, 2000, where Triple H is just starting to become the game, everything like that. But he gets something, just this hardcore. You see, I think it was Rumble 2000, him versus Mick Foley. And was it Hell in a
Mm,
Cell, I believe?
I think
And
so.
just, or
Yeah.
maybe whatever it was, you remember the pallet sticking out of his leg, the
Yeah. Well.
thumbtacks,
Yeah.
so many different aspects of feuding with Mick Foley, I think helped make him, you know, a main event guy. I think that was huge. And it also got some cool moments where you see Mick Foley's able to bring back Cactus Jack to be
Hmm.
able to compete with Triple H. I think that was huge. I think that's the one that far and away stick out to me more than any is the Mick Foley Triple H feud.
I'll say The Rock obligatorily.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can get out of here without mentioning The Rock. And
No.
there's a lot of talk about how, we mentioned it before that you got DX there, you got Nation of Domination, you got them kind of on sort of parallel paths throughout the WWE at the same time. And they're both just, waiting to meet at that peak, which they did several times throughout their career. And those were always fantastic matches. I will be a little bit biased towards his feuds with the Undertaker as well, because I got to see 27 WrestleMania 27 in person, and that match, for as much as that pay-per-view is loathed, in WrestleMania history, that was a fantastic match. So I loved all of that, and then that saga continues on, obviously, as Shawn starts to have his matches with Taker as well. So, and then you got Shawn himself. For
Yeah.
as good
Oh
as
yeah.
they were partners in D-Generation X, I would argue almost even better rivals.
What a story. Because that's another one of, when we go back to moments. Yeah, Shawn Michaels comes out of retirement, throws him the shirt. He's like, we're doing this. Triple H at the time, this is post Garden. He's a face. What does he do? He turns on Shawn Michaels. Everybody's hyped. Everybody's chawing at the bit for a DX reunion in '02. And he turns on Shawn Michaels. You start seeing this brutality, 3 stages of hell. I think this feud carried on for almost a year, where you get Shawn Michaels, Triple H just putting out banger after banger.
And Shawn Michaels is another person that we will just forget that his last match was that Saudi match with Hunter and Taker.
That was just
Oh
so
boy,
bad.
that thing went off the rails.
I think that's where we went back to, like, it's good to see him in the crowd, It's
Yeah.
good to have a cameo. We don't need the match. Not everybody can be Ricky Steamboat out there at 55, 60. I wanted to highlight a couple moments that kind of maybe get shoved under the rug. The Katie Vick with Kane.
Oh no. Yeah.
This is the one that was just awful, but it was also like good awful, because it was so bad that 20 years later we're still talking. Basically, for anybody who hasn't tuned in, Triple H was basically hinting at he was going to make love to Kane's dead girlfriend. So leave that to your imagination. It was awful. Whole funeral parlor segment. One of those moments of the 2000s, but it's heel Triple H at the same time.
It reminds me. Did you watch any of the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary, Matty?
I want to so bad.
Go back and watch it, but they actually run a whole segment. I think Tom Hanks ends up introducing it, if I remember it right. And it's basically all of the stuff that wouldn't air on Saturday Night Live if it was by today's standards. I mean, things that just, you're like, wow, this aired on TV and people were okay with it. And that makes me, that's basically like, it was so bad and it was good. And you look back and you're like, oh God. And that's basically that storyline for you.
Well, and then you have the 2-man power trip where Triple H actually tears his quad for the first time. A lot of people forget that when you had a heel Stone Cold after WrestleMania, was it WrestleMania 17, I believe, where he shakes hands with Vince at the end of the match.
Vince. Yeah.
Well, that goes on to have Triple H and Stone Cold as the 2-man power trip for that summer. They're dominating.
Right. The tag team. Yeah.
Yep. And then he tears the quad, of course, finishes the match against Jericho and Benoit. That's kind of what started this allure as Triple H being one of the GOATs. But yeah, another thing, kind of what could have been if we would have gotten a little bit longer run with the 2-man power trip with event, because that's something you don't see every day, is 2 like long-term booking where you have Stone Cold Triple H as tag champs for months. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we do talk often about the tag team division kind of putting together singles competitors together, but it's never at the echelon, right? Like it's never almost at the Brothers of Destruction sort of echelon. It's not the Triple H and Austin teaming up. It's just kind of 2 guys that you feel like don't have a path, and we don't see that kind of like those peak players coming together to form a tag team like that as much anymore, but. We've talked about the Hall of Fame career as Triple H, the performer, Matty, and I would be remiss if we got out of here without talking about what Triple H has done post his in-ring career and kind of taking his vision to what we know present WWE as now. Now, grant you, circumstances had to play out the way that they did with Vince for us to get here, but you play the hand that you're dealt, and that's what he's doing. He's taking the ball, he's running with it. And I would argue that, these 18 months, 24 months, whatever we have under Hunter, as kind of his brand, as like his WWE, if you will, is far and away. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying it's far and away better than the last 6, 8, 10 years of Vince, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. This is like going for your doctorate, being in an understudy program for what, 15 years under
Yeah, that's a
Vince
great
McMahon.
comparison.
And now you're getting to tutor, take what worked for Vince and what didn't work and kind of use your concept of your experience. Vince McMahon was never a wrestler. He was a promoter. That's what he did. He
Mhm.
promote. The promoting's already done at this point. Like that's tongue in cheek. That's there. So now you have a guy who has a mind for a business and sees the wrestler's perspective. And I think that's why we're reaping the rewards from NXT, the Performance Center, NIA deals, everything like that. This guy, you could stop his career at 14-time WWE champ, 5-time
Right.
IC champ. The list goes on and on about his accomplishments in the ring. But it might be when we're all said and done, what he does outside the ring is going to far more exceed what he did in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good chance of that. Obviously, we're well jumping the gun. Things could happen, things could fall apart. But if you look at the vision and what he's taken on, the Netflix deal is there, so it has WWE has the biggest reach that it's ever had by far.
Right.
We're going international for all these PLEs now. He is the camera work that you see night
Oh,
in and night out on Raw and SmackDown. You think about the stars that are being made with main event Jey Uso, with even with Gunther, with Cody Rhodes. And that's not to say that Vince didn't have some hand in some of these things, but I'm just saying that Triple H, the way he, had the people around him and DX elevated, I think that's what he's done as well, as a corporate partner here, now with WWE. And so personally, as long as this keeps going, as long as this train keeps rolling, I I think good things are coming. And I don't know if you caught earlier this week, Matty, but Road Dogg Jesse James was promoted to head writer of
correct.
SmackDown, or co-head writer of SmackDown. And I think he had been quote unquote head writer at some point back in the past and then got relieved of that position. And people were kind of bemoaning at the time period that Road Dogg was lead writer for SmackDown, and AJ Styles actually stepped up and said, "Hey, uh the guy that was running the place at the time took Road Dogg's ideas and made them not his ideas anymore. So why don't we not judge until we see what we get?" And so I think that just kind of speaks to Triple H having the confidence in guys to go let them do their thing and what they're good at.
Absolutely. You go from a tyrant to whatever, a leader. You're getting a leader. You're getting a guy who's not tearing up a script 30 minutes before the show. You're getting storytelling. You're getting booking. Like you said, all the aspects of what a professional wrestling, what it is. It wasn't wrestling forever. It was sports entertainment. I don't think there was enough emphasis on storytelling, bell to bell work. It was it was a point, it was crash course, it was the bodies. And now, like we keep saying, Triple H is bringing what Vince McMahon did well, and he's adding to it. So I think that's where we're at with this revolutionary aspect of what's going on in WWE, the product at the moment.
Yeah, and again, it's not perfect. And when you're managing, 100 on-screen talents or whatever the number is now, it's not going to be perfect all the time. But I think if we take the foundation and what we got at WrestleMania 40, what we're getting week in and week out from, the three main shows, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and you say, hey, here's the groundwork and it's only going up from here, then I think it's a good time to be a WWE fan personally. And I think, to your point, Triple H's career after his in-ring career could well exceed anything that he did in the ring. Before we get out of here, Matty, anything else you want to say about the game, the Cerebral Assassin, the 14-time WWE champion?
Dude's done it all. Um, we've went over Triple H moments, memories. Another thought process is that entrance music.
Oh,
Motorhead, drowning
Man.
pool, whatever it was. I've never had a
Man.
guy that puts you in the zone when he comes out. And if it wasn't the music, it was the entrance, the water bottle, the WrestleMania entrances. Like that's a episode in itself is just his
No, you're right.
showmanship.
You're right. What am I, an idiot? We're skipping entrances and music. My God, man. Yeah. Motorhead, whether it was the DX music, the Motorhead era,
King of Kings, it didn't matter.
King of Kings,
They
yeah,
all
it didn't
hit.
matter. It was all so good, and I still honestly, one of my favorite entrances. I know a lot of people don't care for the match, but him and Roman at 32, which I was there for as well. He comes out on the the giant motorcycle with Stephanie on the back, and they're all just in that black leather. I mean, talk about just looking like somebody coming to just kick your ass, man. I mean, yeah, his entrances, his entrance at 31, kind of the Terminator entrance coming out from underneath the stage. Just so good, dude. That talk about metal just meeting wrestling and being the perfect connection. So good. So good.
And I think that's one of those things that's going to carry on is that performance aspect of it, of what you get from sometimes the entrance means just as much as the match.
Yeah.
And when you can put fans in the zone that you're an ass kicker or you're that mentality, sometimes that can make or break a superstar. Not saying Triple H didn't have the in-ring work, but that Motorhead that helped make the game.
All right. Two more things before we get out of here.
Oh no. Here we go.
You jarred
Mind
my
fuck.
memory.
Let's go.
You jarred my memory. So one, he did break my heart once. Did Triple H beating Sting at WrestleMania 31 for Sting's only WrestleMania. Biggest Sting
Huge.
fan right there. Fifth row seats, and I was so happy to see Sting in WWE getting his WrestleMania moment. And then he lost. I mean, it was an incredible overall match and production and all the things. But man, I was certain Sting was winning that match.
When that's a dream match. That's something we
Yeah.
never got to see in the WWE. We didn't see a bunch of WCW star or the ones you wanted to see.
Right.
Hogan, you can
Right.
kind of count, but he was a WWE guy. Sting was always WCW.
WCW. Yeah.
And we talked earlier, NWO DX. You got all that at WrestleMania 31. You got the Triple H entrance. You got Sting. You got NWO DX, man. Like that's one of those you probably go back and watch. And if you're looking for nostalgia, or you're just looking of what greatness is for in-ring performance, that tells a story right there.
Do you think, last thing, do you think we
Mm.
can take the Shawshank Redemption Andy approach and write Triple H a letter a week and see if we can get actual musicians back in there giving out
Oh,
actual
Jesus.
songs? Like, how many
Like what
letters do we got to write before we can make this thing happen, man?
when I think it takes away. Here we go. We were fucking loving this thing, and now Def Rebel comes up, and we're flatline.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
I
man.
don't.
Sorry.
It was good. We'll see. I don't know what the deal is there, but I think having one guy do all your music isn't necessarily needed at this point. You've got all
Mm,
these rappers and whatnot that are sitting front row. Like let the creators have more of I mean, you can have Jim Johnson, but that kind of does the same thing as a Def Rebel. We need variety. You need to feel the character like we feel, Motorhead with Triple H. Maybe, something goes right with a character that we did. Maybe it's a Jey Uso or, I don't know who, but there's something about having that one-on-one ambiance with the crowd through your entrance.
yeah, I agree. All right, I'm taking the Andy Dufresne approach. I am taking the Jean-Paul Levesque approach. I'm taking out my quill pen and I'm getting to writing letters after we after we end this podcast, Matty. So next week, let's look forward to that just a little bit. The Elimination Chamber. It was solidified during Monday Night Raw tonight with Seth Rollins and Roxanne Perez winning. So both Elimination Chamber matches are set. Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn have an unsanctioned match coming up at Elimination Chamber. So we got a lot to talk about next week, Matty, when we are giving out our Elimination Chamber predictions.
Absolutely. Buckle up, guys. We're on the road to WrestleMania, and there's a lot more yum-yums, good stuff to look forward to on WrestleMats. We're also, if you didn't know, dropping content in short form. Make sure you check out our YouTube page at WrestleMats across the board.
Instagram, X, all the good stuff. We're there. He's Matty Riser. I am MATTKELLEY. Worked on it just for you, Matty. Worked on it just for
Oh, that's
you.
awesome.
We'll see you next
Jesus.
week. It's been
Oh.
WrestleMads.
Woo! You got me there. I was not ready for that.